All right, giving us some time for you guys to get in watching. I have two wigs that I am currently making right now for some clients. So I thought this would be a perfect opportunity to demonstrate and answer questions as I demonstrate this. So I'm going to make sure I'm watching on my end. Okay, now I hear myself. Okay, so if you are watching this from, and I'm going to repeat this again anyway, if you're watching this from the website itself, you're going to need to tap on the actual video and then tap the word YouTube, and you'll watch it from the YouTube app or from YouTube itself, and that'll give you the ability to comment if you would like to. So that's what you're probably going to need to do. So I'm also aware that when I do these webinars, you may not be able to be in with me on all of the webinars. And this is specifically for those of you who have done the entire program or are doing the entire master courses. I understand you may not be able to actually be a part of it. So they're going to be left on the site for you to watch later. So this is really a good opportunity for me to demonstrate what I'm doing. So let's see. I'm going to turn this around. And then, come on, let me switch you on the other side. And you're going to see me work. So. Sorry, cleaning it off so it makes it easier for you guys to see. I'm going to put lighting where it needs to go. So I am doing a curly wig for a client. So I'm going to bring the light in a little bit more so you guys can see. So I'm doing a curly unit for a client, and I am doing the first sewing method, which is called a fold over method. So a fold over method is actually when you're taking the entire track and you're just going back and forth in this zigzag motion through the cap. So you can see I'm using my phone so you guys can see it. See you, use me in the mirror, being a goofball. So the first thing I'm going to demonstrate is the fold over method, and I'm only going to go so far with this wig, and then I'm going to switch over to the other one and show you when it's best to actually cut the wefts instead of doing the fold over method. And just to give you a quick tip of that, it's better to do the fold over method with textured hair and the cutting of the wefts with straight hair and sometimes a much more looser wave. This is more texture, and it's a more curlier unit or curlier hair. So it's easier for me to hide how I'm going to be doing the edges of the wig with the fold over method. So I wanted to show you guys that. So right now it's just pretty much placed, and this is the tip I want you guys to get, is how to tack this down. So I'm going to have a video up that specifically is geared to just the fold over method and how to tack this down, despite the fact that I am going to be demonstrating it in this live webinar. So what you don't want to have happen is when you do the fold over, it gives you this like U curve on the ends, and then it doesn't work that way. So it's better for me to just show it to you or demonstrate it. So I'm going to, you guys can see the double. I need to be able to see when you guys are commenting and asking questions, when you're able to. All right. So where's my thread? So big old thing of thread, and I'm going to thread my machines. Let's pull this back a little bit. Light is right there. So curved needles, best needles to use to So around the wefts instead of through the wefts. The only time you'll need to go through the weft is on the ends of the cap when you start sewing. So I'll give you an example. Right now, I'm mid here. So that's where my thread was done and finished off. So I knotted through that. And that's the exact same thing that I'm going to be doing on the ends of the caps. So anytime I start off, I'm going to pull it through. And I'm going to pull it all the way to the end. And you got to make sure you check that your thread and everything isn't all tangled or hard to deal with. So there we are. So there's your setup. And then I'm going to put my needle through that, and that's going to be my first loop. Now I've demonstrated this particular stitch in the video content and in the last live webinar, but this is actually called a blanket stitch. So it's with me holding, I'll let you guys see, I'm holding the thread up above the weft, and I'm taking the needle and I'm going around the track, so underneath it and through the cap, and then I'm going to pull it. And it'll give you thread over the top, and then it'll have the thread coming through. So that'll help the tracks to lay nice and flat. So it's called a blanket stitch. That's the actual name of this stitch. So I said I would repeat this again. If you're watching this now, if you need to ask a question or make any comments, make sure you tap on the video, look for the word YouTube, and select that so that you're watching it from the actual YouTube app or from actual YouTube, so that you're able to make any ask any questions or comments. So I'm getting to this end, and this is why you need T-pins, because T-pins kind of help to keep everything in place. So I am about to do what is called the fold over method right in this area, meaning that I'm just going to continue this without cutting the track. So what I do is I'm going to bend it, and I'm going to flatten that, and then I'm going to go through the cap and also through the double fold of the track. So that's the first thing that I do, so you guys can see that I'm giving it some time. So if you're just tuning in, make sure that you select the word YouTube so that you can watch this from the YouTube app or from YouTube itself if you're on your desktop computer, and you're able to ask me any questions that you need to ask. I would be able to see it pop up. So if you're just tuning in, that's what you need to know, and I will repeat it periodically just in case you forget. But again, this is the fold over method. So I sewed all the way through, and then once I got to the end, I did a nice little fold, and I put the needle right through the entire fold, as well as through the cap, the edge of the cap. And so now I'm going to pull my thread through, and be very careful with it, because when you're learning this or you're starting this off, sometimes it can be a little hard or difficult to deal with. But as you do it so often, you'll know how to move a little bit faster without your thread doing this. So it's because I have a long amount of thread. There we are. So now it's secure. I'm going to do that maybe about 3 or 4 times, going through the cap and through the double fold of the edge, so that I can flatten that edge out. This is called the fold over method. This is a method that was practiced with wig making probably a couple of years now, probably about 5 years now. So I go through it at least 3 times, and there it is. It's flattened to the edge of the wig. This is only best for textured hair that you are using to make a wig with. So making sure that light is on there so you guys can see. so it's flat. Then I'm going to continue it on. And before I start sewing, it's smart. I want to say smart. It's work efficient to use your T-pins to kind of place everything, spacing it nice and neat, and just pin everything down. And then I'm going to fold over once I get to this side again. So I'm just going to pin here. And then now I'm going to continue to sew. Again, this is called a blanket stitch. So it means that you are keeping your thread above the wefts, taking your needle, pulling it underneath, making sure you're catching the cap and underneath the weft, and pull. Take it over, go up and under. So under and up is actually what we want to say. You're going underneath, you're going up, and continuing. So you've probably seen this method, this particular sewing method from the previous content videos and from the previous webinar. So this is a wig that I'm doing for a client that I need to have sent out to them by mid this week. So what a perfect timing, because I had a different wig. Now spacing is up to you. I prefer to do wide spacing because that keeps your cap from getting smaller. So when I mean your cap from being smaller, if you space these too close together, it will squeeze or, you know, pull in your cap, and it makes your cap smaller. So I tend to like making them a little bit wider, and when I mean wider, I mean about a finger apart. So once I'm here, I try to go about a finger apart in inserting the needle again. If you have any questions, keep in mind, you can just make sure you're watching this actually on YouTube and make any comment or question that you can, and I can answer it for you. But this is just going to be demonstrating. I'm going to be finishing one of these wigs on here if I can, in timing, because there's certain things I want to show you guys. So now we're at the end where we do what is the fold over method once again. So I want to make sure my thread is up above, and then I want to fold it wherever I am, and then I'm going to go inside through the cap and through the actual fold. So do the cap and the fold. Pull that through, and then do that again, maybe about 2 to 3 more times. So I'm going to move this over so that it's out my way. I'm doing this really slow. I'm usually a lot faster, but I'm doing it slow so you guys can see. So I'm going to put that needle up there for a second because I need to get this hair out of the way and get it started for the next row of sewing. So about a finger or two apart, depending on the type of hair that you have. Overly textured hair can go or can stand to be distanced at 2 fingers apart. Lightly textured hair can stand to be about a finger apart, and that's what I mean by laying your tracks as far as the distance is concerned. So if you're in the middle of making your own wigs right now, this is what I do. So I'm going to pull this through about 1 or 2 more times. Make sure it's through the fold, because I want this fold to be flat. I don't want it to be bulky on the edges for when this client has to put this wig on. So it has to be flat. And the only way I can flatten that is through the thread to get it flat to the cap. So this is the only time you will see me go through the weft of the hair. Other than that, once I'm getting ready to sew, I need to stretch this to make sure that everything stays flush and I don't have too much stretching or anything going on. So I have to pull that down, make sure that's lined up. There we go. And then back to my blanket stitch. So remember, making sure that the thread goes above the weft and you're going under and up. Make sure you give some good spacing, at least a finger or so apart of when you insert the needle again. This can be eyeballed, but if you feel that you need help or guidance with that, notice I have them in between my two fingers. I'll use my thumb and then I'll put the needle through. So that's still a good distance. This method is better because it keeps your caps from shrinking. Because sometimes when you hand sew, and when I start to teach you guys how to use the sewing machine to do it, I'll show you how you could do that to keep your cap from stretching as well. But giving this some space gives it enough to stretch out. That way you're not worried about it being too tight and they can't get it over their heads. So that's why that should be a good thumb or finger distance apart. Now, when you get to a point where you're running out of thread, and it should be about a finger's length of thread that you will probably have left, because it also needs to be about the length of the needle. This is the second time where you will see I will go through the weft of the hair and create a knot. And how I would do that is I would do what is called a wrap stitch, or what's the other word I want to call it? It's like a wraparound. So you're just going around inside of the track and inside of the cap and just kind of creating that knot until you can't do it anymore. And that will make sure that it's secure. So I do not sew through the wefts through the entire wig. You don't want to do that because it takes longer. Some of us have older hands, I will say that, and it's just kind of hard to get that through there and doing that throughout the entire wig. And it also protects your wigs from the weft of the hair from shedding. I don't use any kind of like glues or anything when we do the cut wefts, which I'll show you that in a second, but I don't do any of those things. I just knot the ends, or if when I go through the weft, I only go through it when I have to do the fold over method or when I'm almost done with my thread, and I don't have to worry about any shedding in that area. When you cut the wefts, you're going to have to do that same knotting without having to do any glue to seal your wefts. So you won't have to worry about shedding in that. So there's no shedding in this because this is the fold over method regardless. There's no cutting involved. It's you're folding over and starting all over again until you're done with that full weft of hair. So I'm just going to pin this down, make sure everything is kind of lined up. So I'm using T-pins. You can use fabric pins that you get from a fabric store. They work just as well with the little ball points on it. I like the T-pins better because they're heavier and sturdier, and this is just giving me the ability to keep going. So I'm going to keep going on this last one just so you guys can see it again. I'm going to stretch this so that this is flush. And then I'm going to show you how to attach the, because you really should start with your closure first, especially if you're putting on left or right side. But I just wanted to show you guys the fold over method because this method is awesome for curly wigs. So, my thread. Okay. can see. All right, so I'm going to put this through. So at the ends, to knot the end of your thread, if you don't already know how, there's so many different tips and tricks to it. I think this just knotted on its own right here. Knotted on its own. You can see that. I'm going to cut that off and knot it. So and just create a nice little knot. You don't have to worry about cutting the tails or anything off of it as long as you keep them pretty short. But if it irritates you, go ahead and cut it or do it after for quality control of the wig. So now we're at another fold. So again, making sure you have that fold. We're going to go through the cap and through the fold. Okay, because we're starting off a new thread, I am going to make sure that this is looped inside of that thread for the first one. So take your time, pull it all the way through, and then do this again a few more times. Make sure that's looped through. Remember, the idea is to keep this flat. So now that it's down, just so I have some control of what's going on, I'm going to start sewing. So remember, this is the last I'm going to do this. This is the blanket stitch once again. So making sure the thread is above, go under, around, through the cap, and pull it up. Oops, sorry guys. Make sure you guys can see. To be honest, the closer I get to the crown of the wig, usually the wider the stitches are. Again, blanket stitch. So they usually be a little bit wider. And you notice makes it look a lot more cleaner because the thread is sitting on top of or above the wefts. So and then now that I'm at the end, again, I'm going to put my thread up at the top and I'm going to knot this, and then I'm going to transition to a different wig because I have more than one wig I got to do. So this is fold over method once again. Just fold it over, go through the cap. Sometimes it's okay to go through the elastic and then loop. So your idea is to create a knot at that fold in order for it to lay flat. Oh, it's a lot of work getting it through that double fold, but it depends on your weft of depends on your hair. So, and you just keep going. So I'm going to take this off. guys see? Well, before I take it off, let me show you the other stitch you need to know how to do for like lace closures. So I'm going to wrap this up all the way around the wig for right now. So it's out of my way. So how is everybody's Sunday? Nobody's commenting yet. You got any questions? How was your Sunday so far? If you want to comment or anything, make sure you're actually watching this on YouTube so that you can be able to make any comments if you need to. If you can see, I'm just switching it to my tripod for right now. My wig tripod. So you can see the top of the wig and what I'm doing. Alright. So we're going to transition down here so you guys can see. And I'm going to take this wig head off and put it here. Now that that's knotted, I'm just going to cut that and start a new thread and show you the lace closure that is being used for this wig. I probably need to tell you guys something about lace closures and what usually happens depending on how long they are. Or am I using a lace closure for this one? Probably not. Actually, no. Here it is. The lace closure. So this is going to be a center part wig, but you can always transition it to a side part, whether left or right, depending on the cap that you're having. But this is specifically a center part wig. This is a lace closure. It's a 4x4. You will be learning how to make units like this, meaning like you'll learn how to make lace closures. You'll also learn how to make 360 closures, lace closures, as well as frontal pieces. So, you know, frontal pieces are the ones that go right along the front, which are the most affordable if you plan on buying your own. But you'll learn how to make them pretty simple. A lot of times when you deal with closures, there are shorter hairs that are either baby hairs that are in the front, or they're on the inside of the actual hair, which you may not notice them because they are mimicking the texture of the hair. But sometimes there are shorter hairs, and that you will notice it more so with straight hairs, and I'll show you that with a wig in the next module. But sometimes there are shorter hairs. The reason why that happens because the longest loose hair, and when I mean loose hair, is hair that's ventilated into the lace. Loose hair is usually also hair that we use to braid our hair with. If you've been in African braiding or any type of having to use loose hair to braid into your own hair, that's what I'm talking about. And they would have to ventilate, or another word we can say is latch hooking, because that's one of the methods. But I'm going to teach you how to do an actual German style ventilating, and the lock. The what's the most common one? I just said it, but They usually don't come no longer than 16 inches. And if you have a closure that is longer than 16 inches, you may find that inside there is shorter hairs. You may find that there are shorter hairs. Like you can see there are shorter hairs in here. I don't know if you can see it, but I see it. And that's not even in the front. That's in the middle of the actual closure. So that happens. So don't worry if you decide to purchase a closure for a client and actually put that into their wig and you're worried about, don't worry about that. And even when we start making our own and you want it longer, just keep in mind they have to fold the hair over a little bit more before they can ventilate it. But that's in a totally different module. That's the last the module where you're learning how to make lace units. But any wig that you're making by hand or by sewing machine needs to be attached to the wig first. So I know you guys saw that I started off with the tracks first because I wanted to show you guys the fold over method. But now I'm going to pull this back because this would be the correct way to have this wig on. And you'll notice that I have excess here in the back. So when I'm ready to sew the rest of the tracks on, I'm going to pull this right back over so that this is flush to the head and I'm able to make sure that the tracks that I'm going to continue sewing on here is also flush as well. So just for the purpose of getting this lace closure on, we're going to pull this back to right there. Those are placed exactly where they need to be. And then keep in mind, center, side parts, totally up to you. This is a free part. Well, is this a center part? No, this is a free part. So it actually has 3 partings supposedly indented into it. But I think it's best to, when you're using a 4x4 closure, that you place it directly in whichever side part that you want or center part instead of just putting it right in the center and then expecting for it to have enough for a side part on either side. So that's just my thing. Unless the person wants that, I would prefer to use a lace closure. So the edge of the hair, so there's a particular amount of lace that sits out. You do not want to place it like this. This is incorrect. Okay, so this is incorrect. However, you do want to find where the edge of the cap is and or the edge where the hairs are ventilated starting off like the hairline, and you want to lay it right there along the hairline of the cap. But you don't want to fold this under. You want to make sure that that is extended out and just lay the hairline along the line of the cap. And then pin it down 2 or 3 points. So right now I'm doing it at 2 points and I'm making sure that it's stretched across. And my 3rd point is optional, but right in the center. The next thing you want to do is get all of this hair into a nice little ponytail and be able to lay the rest of the closure down flat. I'm going to do that. I have some rubber bands that are still here. So I'm going to pull all of this up. And I'm going to pin here. So 3 points. So you have your 3 points in the front, and then you have your 3 points in the back. So make sure each side is down and flush to the cap as well as the head, the canvas head, and there's my 3rd point. And then once those are pinned down pretty good, if I need to be able to see what I'm doing when I sew this down, now I can actually get this into a really good ponytail out of the way so I could start to sew it. So the actual sewing, the stitch that I wanted to say was called a loop stitch, where you're just looping through. There are other stitches that you can use, but they're not as secure as a loop stitch. So I'll give you an example of a stitch that you don't want to do when you're attaching wefts or a closure. So this is not going to be a knotted thread. I just want to show you what it looks like. So this going across or along the edge, you don't want to do a running stitch. This is called a running stitch, or some people call this a basting stitch. You don't want to keep going along the edge like this with the line like that stitch. No, it's not very secure whatsoever. Even if you start off knotting and then continue, it's not as secure. So you don't want to do that. You want to do what is called a loop stitch. So I'm preparing my needle and thread. So a looping knot to the end, and you want to start from one edge, and you're going to go up. So under and up. Come all the way through. Because this is a starting point, you want to put your needle through the loop and then make sure that that's secure. And then you're just going to go up and pull. So this is the loop. It's like you're just going around the edge of the closure. So you're going through the cap and through the closure and a loop, so like a circle or a whip stitch. So see, I'm not focusing on taking the thread and doing the blanket stitch. I only just want loose thread just going up into it and around the edge of the closure. This makes sure that your closure is secure, because keep in mind, you or your client is going to be cutting parts of the cap off in order to expose the lace closure when they do the parting, when they install this wig onto their head. So that's why this stitch is better. It is more secure than the previous one I showed you, which is a running stitch. So I'll show you what I mean by the one you shouldn't do. You do not want to go up and under and continue in that motion with the thread inside without nothing keeping it secure to the cap. So you don't want to go up and under in there like along the edge. You want to make sure that the thread is looped around the edge of the closure. There we go. Gotta be careful where your T-pins. I use a lot of T-pins around to keep things secure and out of my way. So it makes it a lot easier for me to sew or sew faster. Um, Most of my wigs, I prefer to do them handmade, but I'm starting to transition back into the sewing machine wigs because they are about a good 15 minutes faster. It takes me about an hour to do a complete wig. So, well, actually, it takes me about, yeah, it takes me about an hour to do a full wig with a closure, with or without a closure. And about 45 minutes, maybe 30 minutes to do a sewing machine wig because I sew pretty fast on the sewing machine. So that is actually the next webinar. There'll be 2 more webinars for that particular module for a sewing machine wig. So I'll be showing you tips and stuff on what are the right closures, what are the right caps to use, and what zigzag stitches are best, and how to attach the wefts to the cap without too much stretch or not enough stretch in the cap, so the person can actually fit the wig on their head. So I'm gonna knot right here because I'm done. And then once you're done with your closures, no matter where you place it, keep it exactly like this so you don't have to do anything else, you know, because we have to eventually sew right over the top of the edge of the closure once we finish the wig. So I'm gonna knot right there and make sure that's nice and secure, and then cut very close so there's no extra thread. All right, am I missing any comments here? Okay, cool. Well, I'm checking some things. So, if you're having any difficulties trying to ask me questions or comment, let me know. The only way you'll probably be able to let me know that if you are having issues is you would have to text me. You should have my number because you are my student. The number is 313-414-9347. I need to make sure that you guys are able to, if you got questions, or if you're just watching, you can just watch, but I'm standing here to make sure people can comment. Okay. Oh, okay. So now I can answer questions. Testing. She said testing. So is it like the spandex cap where the edge you only went through surface or you went all the way through the cap? I went all the way through the cap. So there was a question that was asked where is it like the spandex cap with the spandex cap where on the edge you only went through the surface or you went all the way through this cap? I went all the way through the cap, and sometimes through the elastic too, if you're asking about the spandex caps. Because some spandex caps have the elastic in it. All right, so now I can see your comments. So once again, if you're not exactly sure how to comment, it's probably because you're watching this from the website. Press on the word YouTube. So just like click on the actual video, you'll see the word YouTube at the lower right corner. And then it should open up in your YouTube app or onto the YouTube browser if you're on your desktop watching this. And then you're able to comment or ask questions. So I'm sorry if it took me a while to answer that one. That was like almost 30 minutes ago when somebody said testing. So here we are. So this is on. So all I have to do is keep going. So I'm going to come back to this one and show you how I finish it. But I need to show you how to do the cut wefts. So you just learned the fold over method, and I'll have a video up of me showing you and giving you not better, but more other details as to how to do the fold over method, so that that video is up for you along with this live webinar. So we'll come back to this and finish it off so you can see how that works. So you can see everything is pretty much flush to the cap. You want that to happen because our heads are dome shaped, so you need to have all of this. So all of that has to be stretched up against the cap, up against the canvas head, in order for you to have the right amount of length of tracks going from one side to the other. So now I'm going to transition to the straight hair wig, because there was a straight hair wig that I am working on, and these typically are a lot, I want to say they're a little bit harder to work with, but this is all nice and stretched perfectly. So we're going to talk about how to cut the tracks and finish the ends, not the ends off. Yes, so far this cap, the weaving cap on the edge, you can go all the way through it, right? Yep, you can go all the way through it. So I'm moving this up because it's a lot easier. So with straight hair wigs and wigs that have a loose wave to it, and when I mean a loose wave to it, you know, it's kind of like the popular wave pattern, but it's looser. It's not as textured as curly hair wigs. I prefer to have the wefts cut so that they're nice and flush and flat on the edges of the cap. So I do not like to do the fold over method with straight hair. However, if you choose to do the fold over method with straight hair and you have those those bulks of the edges of the folds being too bulky, use flat irons and flatten it out. So it's kind of like you're burning it or you're ironing it flat. That's what you're doing. If you choose to do the fold over method using straight hair, that's only if you choose to do it with straight hair. However, I don't like to do that. I like to do a really nice tight knot on the ends and just cut the wefts. And not only that, usually people don't like to cut their wefts because they worry about shedding. But realistically speaking, when you look at manufactured wigs, like a wig you buy from a store, they are mostly sewn, but the tracks are cut. And you don't deal with a lot of shedding because the ends are backstitched. If you're using a sewing machine, in this case, it's backstitched by knotting the ends. So you can pull on the edge of this hair and you're not going to deal with any shedding that is going on as long as those ends are knotted. And for quality control purposes, as you're doing this, you want to make sure all of that extra thread is cut off. But all you have to do is make sure those ends are knotted. So I'll show you how I do that. So let's come back just a little bit. So first I need to make sure the cap is stretched and flush, because this is going on someone who has a 22 head circumference, and this actual cap, no, canvas head is 22, but I want to make sure that this still has its roundness so that it would fit. So it would fit circumference wise, but I need to make sure that it fits dome wise in the actual on the person's head. So that's why I make sure the cap is flushed to the canvas head. So that is done. And this is actually supposed to be a wig that is a banged wig, so I'm going to have to cut bangs for it. But I'm using a lace closure, not a top closure, which top closures are called circle closures here in Detroit. You rarely ever see those anymore, but because now closures can be used, these can be used to create the bangs. It's just all in how you lay this out, and then I have to style it and make sure the hair gets all the way around in the top, so that way I can do the bangs. So this actually will be going onto the cap backwards, and I usually do wigs that require hair in front of the face, like bangs. I always do the closure last. Any other wig, you should always do the closure first. But anything where you're doing a banged wig only, meaning that this wig is going to have bangs, you would do the closure last, because it would go in the very top part crown of the wig. And then you could be able to cut it and do whatever you need to, and it'll give you the nice fringe because of the length of the hair. So I'm just going to start sewing this down, finish pinning this down, and then sewing it. So now the next method you're learning is how to knot the ends, which is already similar to what I showed you earlier. You want to keep going in a U shape to a certain point, and then eventually you're going to have to go in a circle in the top. So I'm just going to keep going in a U shape, because that's what I'm supposed to do right now. Make sure that's loose. So first step, start your next track about a finger width apart. Make sure there's a slight hangover and pin. Take it across, line it up. If you feel like you need a pin in the dead center of the back, put it there. And take it all the way to the other side, but don't cut. Pin first, because if you cut, you may either have the track too short, and then now it'll shorten the see what I mean? It'll shorten the cap, and then the cap won't fit. Or you may have it too long, and now you're wasting hair, and now you got to cut off that little bit of piece of hair off, and now you're wasting hair. We don't want to waste hair. It's just like fashion. We don't want to waste fabric, so we don't want to waste hair either. So this is the correct way to start it off. Start with the pinning first. There's like a slight hangover of the weft on the edge of the cap. So when I get started from that point, I'll keep sewing in the blanket stitch all the way until I get here, and then I'll knot it. And then I will cut. So don't cut before you sew. Place, sew, then cut. So let's get back to the starting point. I have needle and thread, so take that pin out. I'm going to go through the edge of the cap, and then I'm going to go through the weft. So you can see through the cap and through the weft. because this is a starting point, keep in mind, well, let me do it. Let's pull it all the way through and then put that needle through to create a loop. So pulling it through, create that loop. Now, holding it between your finger and your thumb, making sure that edge is exposed, and I'm going to knot. So I know that that's secure. There we go. Now when I pull through or pull the hair, I'm pretty sure I won't deal with any shedding on the edges. And it's flat and flush to the cap. And then I just start with my blanket stitch, keeping in mind, trying to use finger or thumb distance apart. Keep it loose. Don't make it too tight, or you'll start to see some buckling going on with your cap. So sometimes you get to a point where you don't want to go again, but anytime that you run out of thread, wherever you stop at, you need to go through the cap and the weft a few times to knot, to finish that off, to make sure that that's secure and it won't come loose. Depending on how thick the wefts are, sometimes it's hard to get the needle through, but take your time. And then cut as close as you can, because it should be knotted pretty nicely. And start all over. All right, so this is where I ended at. So about a finger distance away, start it again. And because I'm starting a new thread, keep in mind there's that loop you want to have. Remember that that loop is through. And then start sewing. All right, so I'm just going to keep sewing, guys. If you got questions or anything, please ask. I can actually see if you're commenting, because I'm going to show you what I see. That is what I see. I can see me. So can you see yourself? Hi. So I can see when you're making comments and you're asking questions. I can see from here as I'm working. And then probably as you guys are working, you can see what's going on. So I can see what's going on. That's a little scary to see that like that. So I'm just going to keep sewing, because I need to finish this wig a lot faster than the others. So guys to see how fast I actually move. When we get to the end, remember I said don't cut. Before you cut, make sure you knot that end and then cut. So I'm going to make sure it's lined perfectly first. Do my one last loop through. Cool. And then, so you guys can see, going around and around, whether you're going up and over or down and under. You just want that to be nice, secure to the edge of the cap, and so you can avoid any hair shedding or further hair shedding. You are going to have a little bit of it because you have to cut the weft. Okay, now I'm not going to cut the thread because I can continue on because I'm cutting the weft of the hair. So I'm just going to put my needle up for now and keep this thread out of the way, and then I'm going to cut that off. Pull for any possible hair, which I'm not having any right now because that should be knotted pretty nice. So that's a good practice, is having that knotted as nicely as you can so you don't have to worry about shedding. So dealing with glues and all of that stuff because you feel like you need to seal the wefts, that's kind of done away with. You don't have to do that. There are methods like this knotting that's professional and it works. So now that I'm about to start a whole new row, I'm going to move all my T-pins out of the one that I just finished. You should be fine to periodically brush through the hair if you need to. And then I'm going to start again. So now that I'm about to start again, before I even pin, at this point, since there's thread here already, I'm just going to start knotting. So I'm going to move the thread away. Bring it about a finger width apart at the top. Cool. And then start. Nope, I'm going to have to pin because it's harder than I thought because I'm demonstrating. I have to demonstrate, and that's hard to demonstrate. So, no, pin first. But usually what I do is I would make sure this thread is away, and then I would go up into the cap, and then through the weft. Oh, it's so much harder to demonstrate in the video. When I do videos, I don't know why it's easier, but because I'm trying to be slow. There we are. Okay, so thread is away. Pinch it together and go behind or underneath the cap and through. And then knot that edge. That's all you need to do. Pull that through. Knot that in pretty nice and tight. This weft is so thick. This is supposed to be unprocessed hair. So whatever manufacturer They really did a good job on this weft. It's so thick to get through. That's why I sew around the wefts, because most of them are pretty thick. But when you're starting off, you gotta go through the weft for secure purposes. So I only got a little bit of thread left, but at this point, I'm gonna pin this down and then make sure the rest of this is lined up. Finger width apart. And like I said, you pin down in the back center, go through the weft if you need to, so you know that it doesn't move. And when you get to the other end, don't cut, pin, then sew. Make your cutting the other side the last thing you do after you knot it. So I only got so much thread left here. I'm about to just start knotting right here. It doesn't even matter. You don't want to waste thread either. Sometimes that's pretty hard to do, wasting thread, because you can only knot around so much because of the length of the actual needle. So it's kind of hard to get around enough times and not waste a lot of thread. But that's why there's large spools of it. So that's as much as I can go. Cut and start over. Now there is a trick that you can do for those of you who want to sew a little bit faster. Sometimes your setup time can be a little bit better. And what I mean by setup time, you can buy multiple needles and thread all of those needles, and then just stick them right into the canvas head, and you'll just use each needle with it being pre-threaded. So it's kind of like pre-threading a certain sewing machine. You're pre-threading all of your needles. You'll probably have about 20 to 25 of them, and just pre-thread them just like this. They can be about an arm's distance long, meaning from one hand to the other if your arms are open out at your sides, like a T, or like you're on a cross, if you want to say it that way. But keep in mind, the longer the thread, sometimes the harder it is to kind of deal with it. So you see I'm taking my thumb and sliding through it. Taking my thumb, because I know you guys did not see that. And then sliding my fingers through it. There. That way it's together and I don't have to worry about it coming apart. So, since it's a start, remember, finger distance apart. Under and up. Pull it all the way through, right before you get to the end. There's your loop. And then start sewing. So while I'm sewing this, let's talk about hair quality. Because I know you guys are interested in knowing that. It does not, well, it does matter, but most hair is what we call Remy hair. Remy hair is processed hair. All of this hair is processed. No matter how much you think it's virgin hair, virgin hair is very expensive. So that is one of the ways that you can tell that it's good hair, but not necessarily, because Remy hair can be priced very expensive too, just for the purpose of trying to make money. So that's what some companies do. But most hair can last you up to 2 to 3 years. Remy hair, process, which is processed hair, or virgin hair, you will treat the hair the exact same way as if it was your own hair. There's no difference. So you would need to condition it, definitely, wash it, all of those things. How often? Not as often as you probably would your own hair. Unless you're wearing the wigs like every day, sleeping in the wigs and things like that. So you guys can see I'm about to knot this in before I cut it. So unfortunately my hand is probably in the way where you can't see what I'm doing, but you guys got the knotting method together. So all hair is not good hair, but most hair is, and I'm going to explain to you what. If it does not say synthetic, that is the hair you want to use unless you are making a synthetic wig. Synthetic hair does not last long because it's not human hair. Anything that says human hair, whether it's a Remy, virgin, unprocessed, it's going to be hair that you are going to be able to take care of for years to come. So I'm telling that to you in the most simplest way that I can, so you're not thinking about, oh, is this hair quality? Is it? As long as it says human hair and it does not say synthetic hair, based on how you care for your wigs or, you know, your weaves, that's how long it's going to last. Up to 3 years. Because I've had wigs for that long. And then try to check for any excess and make sure that it's, after it's knotted good, and then you just continue on. Now if you still have thread left, remember I showed you guys you don't need to cut the thread. You just start all over again from the next point. So now I think this is probably a better way for me to show you. So before I get started pinning, I'll place it about a finger and then pinch it between my finger and my thumb. And I would take the thread and the needle, pull it through that edge. And keep in mind, when I pull this up, I don't want to pull this part too tight. I just want to pull it just enough, the full length of the finger, and then start knotting that edge. So again, quality of hair, as long as it doesn't say synthetic, you're good. It can say Remy, it can say human hair, it can say unprocessed, it can say Brazilian, Peruvian, Mongolian. It does not matter. It's all processed hair anyway, but it is human hair that will last you up to 3 years as long as you take care of it. That includes conditioning. All right, guys, let me know if you can still see